everyone. My name is Vidya Murali. I'm the author of the book How to Survive in a Scale-Up Business. Today, we are going to talk about burnout in young, high-growth businesses. And I have two lovely guests with me, Liz and Avril. Liz, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Liz Hosmer. I've got more than 20 years experience in leadership roles in operations and strategy in consumer businesses, and I spent about half of that time at Amazon. And in the last 4 years or so of my full-time working life, I was in scale-ups in senior leadership roles, and I am currently working as an independent advisor and consultant, and I'm in the process of becoming a coach.
Thanks, Liz. Avril?
Hi, I'm Avril Lobo. I have about 15 years of experience working in really high pressure, fast-paced environments, both in India and here in the UK. Half of my career as well was in corporate, was at Amazon. I'm now working for myself, and I specialize in working with senior leaders who are building forwards after big burnout, especially when they're navigating complexities like identity loss, redefining success, and just getting really comfortable with their story and charting their path forward.
Again, as an expert in this area, if someone is feeling I'm already experiencing symptoms of burnout, I am, agitated more often, I'm feeling very tired, I don't have the the zest for life, I am, everything looks a bit bleak for me. And thinking about work, like what Liz said, my body says no, I don't want to even go near there.
Yeah.
What should they do? What would be your guidance?
I think my first thing, and I will say this from my experience and from a lot of people I've heard, you need to talk to someone. And sometimes that someone needs to be someone outside of work. Um, I I mean, there is the whole having conversations with managers and what can work do to support you. But if we're looking specifically at if you know you're in the throes of burnout and the idea of waking up to face the day is just no thanks. Um, I have done, and this is what I would recommend, is speak to a care provider, most likely your GP. A lot of GPs here in the UK, especially, are quite familiar with burnout. They're seeing a lot of people come through because burnout, and having the sense of like blah is it's not a you'll take the day off or the week off. It's going to take a lot more, and sometimes by the time we are in the throes of burnout, it's starting to affect our health. And that's why, we can't just get our energy levels up. We can't just sleep another 8 hours and get it back. So, speaking to a care provider, specifically a GP, if there's noticeable symptoms around low mood, severe anxiety, panic attacks, that was my experience. Speak to a therapist or a mental health professional. I would caution against going to coaching unless your coach is also a dual trained therapist as well. I mean, there's a place for coaching, but if you're in that sort of like, I need support ASAP, please consider speaking to someone and doing it fast. Again, there's no shame in having these conversations. Prevention is so much better. And also, if you're in that place, then being able to put the appropriate treatment plans in place, having the appropriate care partners, knowing who your community is, how you're going to look after yourself day to day is important. And then I think from there, having the conversation around what's work going to look like. Because it's hard to be in burnout and then continue to be, I'm going to just be the high performer and all
Mm.
of that. So I think also coming into a little bit of a what adjustments do I need to make? Do I need to slow down? Do I then need to speak? So I hope I've answered the question, but my first thing is speak to a proper care professional to support yourself.
Yeah. So I see a lot of high profile leaders openly declaring, like, I'm facing the burnout, I'm taking a break. That
Hmm.
is encouraging because the stigma is coming down. However,
Yeah.
on an individual level, I think there is still a challenge because somebody experiencing a mental health issue is not able to guarantee timelines to return like to work, they're taking a break. While if you're even having a surgery, you can say like, okay, I'm having a surgery, I'm going to come back. So that creates this ambiguity and uncertainty about, as an individual, you're already like you're biased because your brain is acting that way, and then to
Yeah.
not be able to promise when you're going to go back to work can become really, stigmatizing. And how do
Mm.
people manage that?
Um, I can only speak from my experience because I even when I work with my clients, they come to me much after they've had that process. There was a lot of shame for me, and You're absolutely right. There wasn't a timeline that I could promise. And I had to then take full ownership for how I was going to look after myself. Because if the GP says it's going to take X number of weeks, if the therapist says it's going to, one just has to go in. Burnout is not a I'll be back in 3 months or 6 months. And I say that again with the sense of each person's body is different.
Mm,
Your conditioning is already different. So no one person's experience is going to be the same. And I will also sort of just add here, recovery is not a bounce back. There needs to be a very clear sense that it's going to be a bounce forward. There's going to be a lot of change that will take place within yourself. But looking after your health is the most important thing. And it is a full, whole health situation. It isn't a I've got depression or I've got anxiety or I just don't have the energy. Most likely, multiple things will be happening. So, yes, I mean, there are the concerns about how do we, I think, first of all, face into that conversation for ourselves. And then secondly, how do we have that conversation with work? But I think again, I'm only sharing this from my experience that this will be different for different people, is have the conversation with your care providers and let them take the lead because it's a pretty serious situation and you want to be doing the best for yourself because you want to come through this being able to, come back to good health, being able to come back to work, being able to come back to energy. So yeah, I know I've gone around the houses there, but hopefully that sort of sets out, the expectation to have with yourself, and therefore then start to set the expectations with work.
yeah. And also giving yourself freedom to heal and take the time,
Absolutely.
whatever
Absolutely.
time is needed, right? I used to be very accountable. I used to tell people, oh, in this many weeks I'll feel better. And at one point, like someone asked me, why are you reporting it to me? Why? You're not accountable to anyone. So yeah, if
Yeah.
you're like a project manager or somebody, you might feel this is a project, but in fact, it
Yeah.
makes it worse because you have to, let go of that control, unfortunately. So
Yes.
it goes against everything, every technique that I learned to come
It
out of
goes
it.
against It goes against everything with it. I'm sorry, I just wanted to add as well, because we've been talking about environment. A lot of these messages will come from the environment, from well-intentioned people, whether they're people at work or your family or loved ones who want to see you get better. So I think, again, only you know your body, only you know what's happening inside of you. You're going to have to take the time and that incubation period to move yourself through it. And sometimes we make that joke a little bit about it being like a cha-cha. It's 3 steps forward and 2 steps backward. And that is what recovery will feel like. But it's all there to kind of help you kind of again recognize some of those patterns, what's important to you, prioritizing work life. So yeah, I was that project manager. So I do recognize the amount of control I have to let go of. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Um, so moving on from individuals, as leaders, as founders, the founding team, you move from growing a business to then being responsible for people. And with that responsibility comes like these things, right? The culture of the people and setting your environment in a way that it's healthy for people to work. How do you think, as leaders listening to this, should do to build a healthy culture that will already act as a protective mechanisms for people working there? Not a subscription to Headspace or no, I'm not saying that's
Yoga
bad.
classes,
Your yoga
yeah.
class. I'm not saying that that's bad, but that's not going to solve the primary core reason why somebody is facing this experience.
Right. Shall I go first?
Yeah.
So I think firstly just awareness, and I think awareness is much better now than it used to be. I mentioned earlier that after COVID, I think people have been talking about it a lot more because it did, COVID did accelerate a lot of this for a lot of people. And I think recognizing that it's not a problem with the individual, their failing or their lack of fortitude or mental strength or whatever. It's a problem with the organization and with its leaders. And so they should not be blaming or shaming individuals. They need to take a look at themselves and to understand why this could be happening. And there are specific things that I wish the leaders I worked with had done. I think maintaining boundaries. This is hard because a lot of these leaders, as you said earlier, Vidya, this organization is their baby, and they got it to scale up stage by working very, very hard. And so the idea of not messaging and expecting replies out of hours is kind of alien to them, but they have to understand that it's not a healthy way of working. And to Avril's point earlier, rest is part of the work. And so getting rid of this idea that like more urgency equals better results. No, more urgency just kind of stresses everyone out. They're running around like headless chickens. Nobody understands what the priorities are, and it's exhausting and really unhealthy for people. So I think that's the first thing I wish leaders had done. And also, showing obvious favoritism towards the people who work the hardest, who work the
Mm,
longest hours,
mm,
and kind of like praising them publicly. And yes, again, sometimes there's a time and a place for there was a crisis and somebody worked through the night to solve it. Okay, fine. That's fine. And we've all done that, and it's okay, but it shouldn't be kind of the standard way of working. I think the second thing I wish the leaders I'd worked with had done is casting aside this kind of don't bring me problems, bring me solutions mentality and culture. And I think when you say that to someone or suggest that to someone, you kind of shame them for flagging concerns. And yes, it can be annoying as a manager, and I've experienced this when you feel like someone just kind of is always coming to you with complaints, and you want to empower, but that's not the way to empower them to find the solutions. You need to either learn some coaching techniques to help them find those solutions, or work together, or get them a coach, whatever you need to do to help them kind of find the solutions and help them get the resources they need. But it's really unhelpful, and it kind of just pushes everything back onto that person and kind of says like I don't care what challenges you're facing. And then again, it's perpetuating this feeling of like this stuff being hard is my fault, and it's like my burden to bear alone. And that is really destructive, I think, for people.
yeah. And sorry, I mean,
No,
interfering
go
here.
on, go on, go. Yeah.
One thing that came up to my mind when we're talking about this, founders especially are almost like really worshipped, hero or heroine worshipped in organizations, especially by young employees. It's quite nice to see because they're getting inspired. But on the flip side, every action the founder does is being role modeled. So if the founder is working, long hours, is sending messages, people think to succeed they need to work like that as well. It might not be the founder's fault, but the way they come across can lead to those cultural implications. The second thing also is founders could start a business because they had a strong conviction, almost this irrational conviction, and that's super useful in that context. But what that can also make them more prone to is not listening to other people's opinion and not having enough people to speak truth to them, right? Say if a founder is putting
Mm,
somebody in a situation that's impossible, like listen, in your case, for them to succeed, uh, they need to know that and they need to listen to it. They need to build a reflective practice of listening to the truths and what they can do about it rather than thinking that it's always other person's problem or they're not they're too sensitive. This is the common one that comes, or they are a big company person, they cannot kind of fit in
mm,
this role. It all can be true, but if there is a pattern, if there is particularly like a revolving door around a particular role, for instance, that's a good indication that it's not the individual's issue. So that time, stepping back, having some reflective practice, stepping back or having somebody speak truth to you could be a very, very powerful technique.
no, completely. And I think it's scary for people because of how they kind of worship those founders. It's scary for people to kind of speak up, and they don't know that they're going to be listened to.
Yeah.
On that note about taking a step back, there's one more thing I want to say on this topic. And I think it's, the understand I wish leaders of scale ups understood, really, like really understood. I mean, if you ask them, they would say yes, of course I understand. But if they really internalize the message of scale ups are not startups, and the things that got you through the startup stage to the scale up stage, the ways of working, the mentality, the mindset, all of that is not is not going to help you be successful at scale up stage. And yes, this applies to burnout, but this also applies to just business success, because it's a teenage phase of a business. And so, but you're going into it with baby um, systems, processes, ways of communicating, tools, all of that, and this kind of running around like headless chickens, firefighting, everybody's doing everything kind of mentality. And if you try to go into the scale up stage where also you've probably hired a whole bunch of new people to help you scale up, and you're just throwing them into this mess and expecting them to succeed, and these are people with different work backgrounds, they're coming from different company cultures, different ways of working, and you're just throwing them all into this big cauldron with all this other stuff, and expecting it to work, and of course it doesn't work most of the time. And so saying, kind of stopping at the threshold of entering scale up hood and saying, okay, we need to take a step back. We've got to get the organization in shape. We need to think about how we work, how we communicate. There are more of us. Are our tools and systems fit for purpose now? Are our processes fit for purpose now? And yes, you can't have the luxury of everybody stopping and kind of meditating over this and like fixing it all in one go, but it's something that you have to have in your head all the time. Like, how do we evolve along with our business goals as an organization, and in the way that we work, and like, this is hard too, because a lot of startup founders are not suited for for scale up life, and they say that 7 years is a very common time for them to exit, because they're like, I'm a startup person, I can't do structure, I can't do all of this. And like, get help, bring in the professionals, get a coach, recognize that, like, to the point that was made earlier, you don't have to be good at every stage and every type of the company. You may still be the super inspiring person who, like, is the figurehead who leads the vision and the strategy, but you need to understand that there are other people who should help when you need to kind of move into this new stage.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't agree more to that. At one stage, the business and people become much bigger than the founder themselves, why they started, and then it becomes a much bigger purpose to navigate, and we need to do justice to that purpose rather
Mm.
than trying to stick on and do the same thing for one individual. Yeah. Any thoughts on this, Avril, from your end?
There were two thoughts that kind of came to mind as I was listening to each of you share there, and especially building on what Liz was sharing, but I think Vidya, you touched on this before as well. The piece around listening and reflective practice. One of the sort of the main things that kind of led to my burnout was operating in an environment where I was sharing a lot of that information of, here are some of the ways we could do things differently or improve, or here are some orange red flags, etc. And I think there is very much that challenge of, when you are the, to use the words, truth teller, what does that mean in terms of then, operating in that
Mm,
environment? And I think the thing that kept coming up as I was listening to each of you share there was psychological safety. And I think whether this is around burnout or whether this is around, teams, processes, efficiencies, how we're going to go from startup to scale up, is around, do we have a process of real culture of psychological safety, where when we are seeking feedback as leaders, or as founders, when we seek that feedback, what are we asking? What are we doing with this information? B, how are we fostering a culture then where that feedback actually becomes something in the culture, and that people, I think, Liz, you talked about this as well. It's not about the complaining, it's that people feel comfortable enough to go, hey, I think this is an issue. The reason I'm surfacing it is because I'm wanting to contribute here. I'm wanting to do something here. So, having that culture of psychological safety. And I think I also wanted to sort of tag that on with well-being as well. A lot of well-being initiatives right now look like, just having that one away day, or I think we potentially made the joke around, let's all meditate around this, or having the yoga room. Well-being initiatives cannot be a box ticking exercise. It's lovely to have those employee benefits, but again, coming back to even something like psychological safety, someone in your team comes up to you and they're able to have an honest discussion around, hey, this is where I think we could improve. This is what I'd like to bring to the table. How do we then keep them safe and keep them contributing in a way that, we all benefit and the culture moves forward? So those were just some of the things that came up for me as I was listening to each of you share there.
Thanks, Liz. I'm glad you brought psychological safety. I feel that's one thing that's going to save a lot of these things, burnout happening. Amy Edmondson have done a lot of research on that, and it's proven that psychological safety is not a soft cushion that you put on people. It's more to do with performance and building teams that can speak truth to each other, talk about failures, and learn from it, and move forward quickly. So while there is more awareness of it, I feel like still like our engagement surveys actually measuring psychological safety. Maybe not. You need to actually. I think the generation effect as well. The new generation are able to ask more questions, talk about these topics more openly. But when it comes to individuals and when they raise issues with their managers or managers manager, there is still a gap in many organizations about really having that psychological safety, really to create the environment where people can be open and raise problems and be part of the solution and not be tasked with go and fix yourself, as was Liz saying, go
Yeah.
figure. So yeah, that's great insight. Okay, we're coming to the close of the conversation. I want to leave with one practical tip, insight, or a tip that you would like to share with anyone listening to either protect themselves or if they're experiencing burnout, you know, heal themselves from that. I can go first. I would say one thing is make sure the job and role and the people you're working with are nourishing you, and you are, choosing something that builds on your strength and an environment that you can thrive. Like we talked about this plant analogy, you can get the best seed, but put it in the wrong type of soil, place it in a condition that's not, south facing, or sun rays, missing sun rays. It's not going to grow, right? So make sure you're putting yourself in the right soil, getting the right level of water, nutrients, and sunlight. And that could be a scale up, that could be an early stage startup, that could be a corporate job, that could be a specific role in a specific scale up and working with certain type of people. So having that fit is so important, and that's for me solves like 70% of issues, and the rest can be managed. Avril, do you want to share your one tip?
Um, I'll build on yours because it's related. Having an awareness of your strengths, your values, your patterns, all of these different things, what's important to you, your priorities. Have a good support partner. If you can get one, get one. There's no end to learning about yourself. But especially if you are already in the throes of burnout or think you might burn out, either because of the interaction of your patterns and your environment, and having your support partner there, just knowing even that someone has your back, that you can share, in the safer environment that they create, that you can kind of check in with yourself, that goes a really long way. And I think that's one of the things I would definitely sort of share, especially when we're in these always on cultures and it's very fast paced. We're surrounded by a lot of people, so just having one place to go and sort of debrief, yeah, that should definitely be a good thing.
Thanks, Avril. Liz?
I think the one thing I would say is if you're in a situation and it feels like things are harder than they ought to be, then they probably are, and this is a burnout risk situation. And I think that can apply both to you yourself, of course, feeling like, gosh, I should be able to do this. I'm having a hard time when I shouldn't be having a hard time. Something's going on. Or also, if you're observing somebody else, whether it's a peer or someone who reports into you, if it just feels like this isn't you,
Mm.
like, you know, you this is the kind of situation you would normally be functioning well in. This is the kind of thing you normally can deliver. Like, take a step back, call it out, find out what's going on, and get help for yourself if it's you, or encourage that person to get some help.
Cool. Thank you both. I really appreciate your time and sharing your experience. with genuinity and authenticity. And I hope that the listeners and viewers are getting a lot of benefit from this. Um, my book is out and it's available on Amazon. You can order it. There's some practical tips on not just burnout, but generally in thriving in scale ups. So I hope you find that useful as well. And have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thanks. Nice to speak to Liz and you. Bye.
Thanks so much. I really enjoyed the conversation. Great to chat with you both about this very important topic, and looking forward to giving the book another read.